You know that feeling when you're reading something and it's just so dense it feels like you're trying to solve a puzzle? Or maybe you've struggled to get your own great ideas down on the page clearly. Well, today we're going to dive into a scientist's guide to great writing, and it's all based on the work of the Harvard cognitive scientist Steven Pinker. So let's get into it. We have all been there, right? Staring at a piece of writing so packed with jargon that it feels like it was designed to be confusing. This cartoon from Pinker's book just nails that feeling. It's a funny take, suggesting that bad writing is some kind of deliberate choice to sound smart. But Pinker argues the real reason is something way more fundamental and, a lot more human. So this really is the big question, isn't it? Why is so much of the writing we see in academia, in business, even in emails just so awful? Pinker's take is that we shouldn't assume it's because people are trying to be difficult. It's not about a lack of intelligence either. It's actually a very specific and totally universal cognitive blind spot. And that blind spot has a name: the curse of knowledge. Now, this is a concept that originally comes from the world of economics, but as we're about to see, it is probably the single biggest reason we all fail to communicate clearly. Okay, so what is it, really? At its core, the curse of knowledge is pretty simple. Once you know something, it becomes almost impossible to remember what it felt like not to know it. And as writers, this completely tricks us. We just assume our readers have the same background, know the same jargon, and get the same context that we do. Pinker tells this one story that shows just how disastrous this can be. So picture this: a totally brilliant molecular biologist, a real leader in his field, gets invited to give a TED Talk. This is it, his big chance to share his incredible work with an audience that's smart and curious, but they're not specialists. He gets up on that stage and, right away, just launches into the exact same talk he'd give to his PhD colleagues. No setup, no explaining why this stuff matters, just a fire hose of acronyms, technical terms, and super specific experimental details. So how long do you think it took before he completely lost the entire room? 10 minutes? 5? Not even close. 4 seconds. It took literally 4 seconds to create a room full of hundreds of people who had absolutely no clue what he was talking about. And this, right here, is the perfect illustration of the curse. It was obvious to every single person in that audience that they were completely lost. But the only person in the entire room who didn't know? The speaker himself. He was so deep inside his own bubble of knowledge, he just couldn't imagine a world where other people didn't share it. So, if the curse of knowledge is the disease, then what's the cure? Well, the good news is, Pinker doesn't just diagnose the problem for us. He gives us a really clear, actionable prescription for how to beat it. It all comes down to these 3 core rules, and they're the direct antidote to the curse. First, you've got to escape your own mind. Second, you have to learn to write for the eyes. And third, you have to embrace what Shakespeare called the soul of wit, brevity. Okay, so since the curse basically traps us inside our own heads, the first and honestly the most critical step is to find a way out. And here is the single most important takeaway. You cannot cure the curse by yourself. It's just not possible. You can try to empathize, to imagine your reader's perspective, but it's rarely enough. The only real cure is to get your writing in front of an actual, real-life person. Pinker, for example, showed his drafts to his mother. Now, she was a very intelligent woman, but she wasn't a cognitive psychologist. Your mission is to find your own version of his mom. Someone smart, someone curious, but someone who is outside your little bubble. So once you have that outside reader, what's the best way to make sure your ideas actually land? Well, that brings us right to rule number 2. You've got to make your ideas tangible. See, good writing isn't about floating abstract concepts. It's about creating vivid, concrete images in your reader's mind. Just take a look at this comparison. On the left, you've got this abstract gobbledygook. The level of the stimulus was proportional to the intensity of the reaction. I mean, what does that even mean? Now, look at the right. Kids look longer at a bunny than a truck. Boom. You can instantly see it in your head. The lesson here is so simple. Don't say stimulus when what you really mean is a cute bunny rabbit. That's the whole game right there. That is writing for the eyes. And as Pinker puts it here, the words themselves, they aren't the point. The whole goal isn't to show off how big your vocabulary is. It's to transfer a real idea from your mind into your reader's mind. And ideas are sensory, they're visual, they're concrete. They're not just some abstract string of verbiage. Okay, and that leads us perfectly to the final rule, which really builds on the first 2. And this one, well, this one might just be the most famous piece of writing advice in history. Pinker points us back to this classic line from Shakespeare.
Brevity is the soul of wit. And it's just so brilliant, not only for what it says, but for how it says it. It's short, it's sharp, it's memorable. It perfectly practices what it preaches.
And this exact same idea was echoed, centuries later by the legend E.B. White in The Elements of Style, quoting his old professor. The advice is so important, it's worth saying 3 times. Omit needless words. Every single word you can cut that doesn't serve a real purpose just makes your writing that much stronger and clearer. Now, these rules about being clear and being brief, they're especially crucial because, let's be honest, the English language itself can be a total minefield. It is filled with bizarre quirks and illogical patterns that can so easily trip up a reader if we're not being careful. The writer Richard Lederer pointed out some of these hilarious quirks. For instance, think about this. If adults commit adultery, do infants commit infantry? And why is it that fingers don't thing or hammers don't ham? Language doesn't always play by the rules of logic, which is exactly why it's our job as writers to be a clear guide for the reader through all this weirdness.
All right, so using these timeless rules definitely helps us communicate better with other people. But how do they hold up now, as we're entering an age where we communicate with and through artificial intelligence? Well, Pinker observes that AI-generated text is often, believe it or not, better than a bad human writer. It's usually grammatical, it's well-structured, it's orderly. But it also tends to be incredibly generic. It just lacks a unique voice or a distinct style or that little spark of freshness that makes a piece of writing truly great. And this all brings us to one final, really critical question. As AI gets better and better at the mechanics of writing, at just putting together clear, orderly sentences, what is the future role for the human writer? Maybe it lies not just in being clear, but in being original, in finding beauty, and in offering that fresh human perspective that a machine, for now, just can't replicate.